Dear African people, here is a question more of us must ask, and ask loudly, because some Westerners keep saying it and we keep believing it. Did the colonialists really build Africa? Or did Africans do the hard labor while the colonial power stood by and watched while extracting the wealth? Roads, railroads, ports, and bridges were not built for Africans. They were built to export raw materials, minerals, rubbers, cocoa, gold to Europe. The labor was African. The sweat was African. The land was African. The lives lost were Africans. And yes, colonialists and their descendants claim the credit. And today, many still repeat the lie that Europe developed Africa. Dear African people, whether you are walking through the streets of Nairobi, navigating Lagos traffic, farming in Dakar, coding in Kigali, planting cassava in Lusaka, or studying in Paris, this letter is for you. Hello, welcome to another edition of the African Narrative Podcast. My name is Femi Soewu. For too long, the world has tried to define Africa by what it lacks. But today, the time has come to say this clearly. We must stop allowing others to define who we are. Because when we don't tell our stories, they tell them for us, and they leave out our brilliance. They reduce our empires to conflict. They reduce our youth to danger. They reduce our language to noise. But we are not what they say we are. We are what we say we are. We should take control of our own narratives. You must write your own books, produce your own films, create your own media, teach your children your own heroes, preserve your languages, your names, your traditions with pride. Because identity is not something you inherit, it is something you own. If you are new to Africa Web TV, this will be the time to subscribe to the channel and the podcast. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you will be the first to know when new videos are uploaded. You might also wish to join the channel as a member. Joining the channel as a member gives you extra benefits like exclusive behind-the-scenes footage and early access to some of our future videos. Dear African people, do you realize yours, ours, is the only continent that has succeeded in claiming its sovereignty from European rule? The European colonization and migration overwhelmed the indigenous peoples of the United States and Canada, reducing them to a minority in their own territory. Same for the indigenous Indian inhabitants of most countries of South America, like Brazil, Argentina, and Chile. Same for Australia and New Zealand, respectively, where the original inhabitants, the Aborigines and the Maoris, became minorities in their own lands and nations. But dear Africans, you said no. The Europeans did all they could in Namibia, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and even Kenya. But ultimately, you outnumbered and even, in some cases, outlasted them. Dear African people, here is a question more of us must ask, and ask loudly, because some Westerners keep saying it and we keep believing it. Did the colonialists really build Africa? Or did Africans do the hard labor while the colonial power stood by and watched while extracting the wealth? Roads, railroads, ports, and bridges were not built for Africans. They were built to export raw materials, minerals, rubbers, cocoa, gold to Europe. The labor was African. The sweat was African. The land was African. The lives lost were Africans. And yes, colonialists and their descendants claim the credit. And today, many still repeat the lie that Europe developed Africa. Let us be clear. Africa built under colonialism was not built for Africans. What was built for the benefit of those who colonized Africa. Africans were the backbone of every brick laid and every field harvested. Dear African people, stop feeling sad and insulted when the Caucasian berate your intelligence. Given the same level playing field, you have always shown you are smarter. How else will you explain that an African with a so-called low IQ sits behind a Windows 95 computer in an internet cafe in a village in Nigeria, and this Nigerian prince still manages to trick a high-IQ European or American into transferring millions of euros and dollars into a bank account in Africa? Whose IQ is deceiving them? They are African people. They will tell you Africa is poor. Don't believe them. Africa is abundant. 30% of the world's natural resources lie beneath the African soil, from gold to oil to cobalt to rare earth minerals. The Congo holds minerals that power the world's smartphones and electric cars. Nigeria, Angola, and Algeria sit on oil wealth. Ghana was and still is the Gold Coast. South Africa shines with diamonds and platinum. Ethiopia has coffee culture that fuels global mornings. Zambia and Botswana are copper and diamond giants. Africa's forests, rivers, deserts, and wildlife are ecological treasure. You are not just living on valuable land. You are the value. Dear African people, let's talk about your people, our people, because they are extraordinary. Aliko Dangote, Mo Ibrahim, Bethlehem Desi, Strive Masi Yiwa, Captain Ibrahim Traore. Africa's youngest head of state, symbolizing bold resistance, Africa's self-determination, and the will to take back Africa's sovereignty. Traore speaks with courage about dignity, unity, and Africa's agency. In a world that often underestimates young African leaders, he is standing firm, reminding us that leadership is not about age, but about conviction. These are not isolated success stories. These are the blueprints. Dear African people, from music to fashion to literature and language, African culture is no longer hidden. It is center stage. Afrobeat, Amapiano, Bongo Flavor, Gengeton, these are global sounds now. Artists like Burna Boy, Thames, Tyler, Diamond Platinums, Shoma Josie, Fally Ipupa, Black Coffee, and Davido are selling out arenas around the world. Films from Nollywood, South Africa, and Senegal are winning global awards. Writers like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Fatou Diom, the late Ngugi Wateogo, Maza Megister, Nadifa Muhammad are shaping global literature. You are not influenced. You are the influence. They are African people. The narrative of Africans being primitive, living on trees, in mud houses, and walking barefooted must be reclaimed, embraced, and re-owned. Why is it that until the Western society figures out how to monetize something from Africa, it is labeled as primitive, barbaric, or backwards? Because simply put, the West has long thrived on a system where value only exists when they define it and profit from it. For generations, mud houses across Africa were labeled by Western media as signs of poverty and underdevelopment. But in 2025, mud is suddenly cheap. The same structures are being rebranded in the West as carbon neutral art homes, biophilic living spaces, or sustainable architecture. In the USA, eco-conscious influencers are raving about rammed earth retreats and sustainable clay compounds. European architects are winning awards and magazines are calling it the future of green living. Not long ago, these same people labeled those homes primitive, poor, and backward. Western photographers snapped pictures of cracked mud walls to represent poverty in charity campaigns. But now, with the planet burning and modern housing falling under its own weight, the so-called primitive solution has now become the cutting-edge answer. The same mud they mocked is now the mud they marvel at because it is cooling their overheated homes. They are African people. In many African communities, walking barefoot is a part of life, especially in rural areas. For centuries, Western visitors saw it as a sign of extreme poverty or neglect. Now, in Germany, the UK, and the Netherlands, there are grounding retreats where participants pay €500 a weekend to walk barefoot on grass, sand, or earth for spiritual connection and electromagnetic balance. They are literally they are literally paying to do what African kids were once pitied or mocked for doing. They call it poverty until they could sell it as wellness. They are African people. African herbalists have used plants like baobab, dongoyaro, moringa, and hibiscus for centuries, not just for healing, but for everyday wellness. Fast forward today, major Western companies now market these same herbs as superfoods and natural supplements, wrapped in sleek packaging and sold at supermarkets at premium prices. When the leaves were in African hands, it was a myth. In a glass jar with a label, it became innovative medicine. They are African people. Indigenous African spiritual systems were demonized by missionaries, colonialists, and even post-colonial governments. Practices like drumming, ancestors' veneration, and spiritual dance were called pagan or satanic. Today, elements of those same traditions, drumming circles, chanting, meditations, are being taught in yoga studios and mindfulness retreats across Europe and the USA and sold as pathway to enlightenment. You were investors before you were colonized. You were royalty before you were enslaved. You were storytellers before you were silenced. And now, in the 21st century, you are not imagined. You are reimagined. For centuries, Western powers justified colonization by labeling non-Western ways of life as inferior, savage, or primitive. This narrative was not just propaganda. It was part of a larger psychological operation that allowed exploitation to happen with moral comfort. If a culture was seen as uncivilized, then taking its land, labor, or knowledge felt justified. So when Africans lived in harmony with nature, used herbal medicine, built with mud, or practiced spiritual traditions, the West did not stop to understand. It dismissed and demeaned. Western systems tend to ignore or devalue anything that doesn't generate profit for them. If mud houses, traditional medicine, or communal farming couldn't be turned into a branded, scalable product, they were called backwards. But the moment there is a market, a way to sell it, patent it, and turn it into a trend, suddenly it becomes innovative, sustainable, or disruptive. You see, capitalism doesn't like what it cannot profit from. Dear African people, the West has long controlled the global narrative through media, academia, and industry. So, when African cultures do something first, it is often ignored and vilified. When the West adopts the same thing, it is seen as a breakthrough. Underpinning all of this is a legacy of racism. The idea that African knowledge is less valuable, less rigorous, or less worthy of respect. It shows up in the way indigenous wisdom is dismissed until it is validated by the Western scientists and institutions. Africans are often made to feel ashamed of their own innovations, only to see the same ideas celebrated globally once the West finds a way to adopt. And I'm being kind because the true word is not to adopt, but steal and sell them. Africa was never behind. The world just refused to listen until it needed saving. Yes, Africa has been exploited. Yes, there are still challenges, corruption, poverty, conflict. But those are not who you are. They are what you have to overcome. You are the continent of young people building startups with no capital. Farmers feeding nations with little support. Activists challenging power. Mothers raising leaders in the face of hardship. You are not defined by aid. You are defined by ability. So stop whispering your wins. Go to the rooftop and shout them. When an African child wins a scholarship, shout. When an African scientist makes a discovery, shout. When an African athlete breaks a record, shout. When an African entrepreneur builds an empire, shout. When you get that degree, open that shop, shout. You are not bragging. You are correcting the record. Dear African people, Africa has the youngest population on earth. That means the future is already walking around, building apps, designing clothes, creating music, farming smart, voting, teaching, and resisting injustice and inequality. You are the future and the now. So let the world know. Africa is not waiting. Africa is writing, and Africans are rising. Dear African people, be proud of your story. Be proud of your people. Be proud of your power. Be proud of your past, and even prouder of your future. And most importantly, define yourself loudly, boldly, authentically. Because the world does not get to tell Africa what Africa is. That is your job. Being proud does not mean being blind to the challenges. It means knowing the worth of who you are and where you come from. For you, my fellow Africans, pride is about honoring ancestors, uplifting communities, and shaping the future with dignity. It is Ubuntu. It is Sankofa. It is Ujamaa. Sincerely yours, Femi Soewu, a fellow African who refuses to be silent. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and the podcast. Share, comment, and like. Hit the notification bell so that you will be informed when new videos are uploaded. You might also wish to join the channel as a member. Joining the channel as a member gives you extra benefits like exclusive behind-the-scenes footage and early access to some of our future releases. Thank you for listening, and be a proud African.
I'm a king, yes, I'm a king.